This video is about how to mix with the CQ18T mixer. There's a lot of content on YouTube that dives deeper into mixing, but I'll keep this video more specific to the CQ series mixers. I've broken this video down into the following chapters. This is by no means a complete guide on mixing, but it will get you started if you want some pointers. Mindset and preparation. Mixing is all about achieving a good balance between all the parts and making a good judgment on which of the musical parts are most important. Most of us will be doing this on our own or with a small team, but at the end of the day, it's everyone's responsibility to make sure the music sounds good for the audience. Sure, this mixer has some great features to help with mixing, but it cannot replace experience and good judgment. I hope this video will give you some confidence and make it easier for you to go out there and mix. The config, processing, and the fader page are where you'll spend most of your time. But before we dive into EQ and compression, we have to get everything organized. In the config page, we can rename and color tracks. It's important to decide on the order of inputs here, as the fader page has 2 tabs for the 16 inputs. Although the input order can be changed in the custom layer setting through the mixer, it's good practice to have a consistent input order to reduce confusion. Let's look at 2 ways I organize my input section. In order of priority. In this order, we think of the audience. What do they want to hear the most? What instrument will they connect with the most? For me, it's generally vocals, drums, bass, guitar, then piano. This means that I only have to focus on the instruments on the first page of the mixer, as they are the most important. In order of pitch. In this order, we organize the tracks from low to high pitch sounds. As this is live music, there's lots of variability here, but generally, this is the order. Drums, bass, piano, guitar, vocals. This means I can make decisions more easily. If I hear something that doesn't sound right in the bass frequencies, I know that it has something to do with the instruments on the first page. There are many other ways of organizing your input section, but try and figure out one that works for you. If you know the equipment and instruments that you'll need to connect to the mixer in advance, it's a good idea to make a channel order as well. It's also helpful to keep in mind that the first 8 inputs are XLR only, so connecting any instruments with jack-to-jack cables directly will not be possible. Front of house, volume, EQ, and compression. As the front of house, there are 3 fundamental tools to mixing that you'll use. These are volume, EQ, and compression. There are useful meters throughout the mixer that can help us make decisions while mixing. Volume is most important, as 90% of the work is done on the fader page. Getting this right is crucial, as no amount of EQ can fix a mix if the volume is not set tastefully.
Felt those same cold feelings. You should know that it'll be okay. Honey, you are my bright shining star. I look.
Setting volume is entirely subjective and depends on your musical taste and experience. But here are some general guidelines on what to prioritize. Vocals. In any performance with a singer, the vocals are the most important part of the song. Make sure the singer feels comfortable when performing, and make sure they are not drowned or obscured by other instruments. In genres without a singer, prioritize the instrument with the most important melody and set everything else around it. Bass and kick drum. The bass and kick drum are important as they occupy a similar frequency range and contribute to the energy of the performance. You must decide which is the most important for the performance. The kick generally gives punch and emphasizes the groove of the performance, while the bass adds weight and power. Setting volume for speakers and monitors. If for some reason the front of house mix is not loud enough, you may be tempted to increase all your faders to 11 and hope for the best. This can cause many problems such as feedback, clipping, and speaker damage. If you're struggling to get the right volume from the mixer, check the back section of the speaker and ensure it's set at the right level. Usually, the speaker will have some sort of mark or indicator to show unity. This is the point where the speaker works best. If the speaker volume doesn't have an indicator, then set the volume to around 75% to start and adjust if needed. Gain is not volume. Gain refers to the sensitivity of an input, while the volume refers to its loudness compared to other sources or instruments. Turning up both the gain and volume makes the source louder, but it's important to know how. When we turn up the gain on a microphone, we make the diaphragm more sensitive. This results in the microphone pickup being wider, which makes it sound louder. If the gain of the microphone is set too high, it results in feedback as it makes it more likely for the mic to pick up the front of house mix. In contrast, when we adjust the volume of the mic, the gain is not affected, which leads to lower chances of feedback. To help with this, the mixer has an indicator in the config gain section for the optimal gain setting for an input. In the fader page, I rarely look at the numbers displayed at the bottom of the volume fader. Rely on your ears and mix for the room. EQ or equalization. Much like a mix can be broken down into its individual instruments, we can break down an instrument into its individual frequencies. I won't go into too much detail here as there's lots of videos on YouTube that dive deep into EQ. If you're a beginner, the quick channels on this mixer are really helpful in getting you started. The quick channel EQ splits the instrument into 3 frequency bands: low, mid, and high. In most cases, the mid-range of the instrument is most important. If you're struggling to push the vocals in a busy mix, turn down the mid frequencies in the EQ section on other instruments, such as guitar or piano. This will create space for the vocals to cut through. We can see this clearly when we convert the quick channels into complete channels. We can see that the guitar and voice occupy a similar frequency range in the EQ, but as the voice is more important, we can remove some mid-frequencies from the guitar to make space for the voice. The RTA function shows us the frequency response of the voice and other instruments in real time. We can also do this for the kick and bass. Remove the low frequencies from the instrument which is less important to the mix to make space. This technique is called EQ carving and can be done more accurately to the complete channels. EQ can also be used to emphasize frequencies. One common application is to add brightness to an instrument. This can be done by changing the high frequency band to a shelf and increasing its volume. In contrast, we can use this to tame the harshness of an instrument and make it sound darker. Another application of EQ is to remove resonant frequencies. These are frequencies that jump out from the instrument or vocal and make it sound unnatural. To find and reduce these, pick one of the mid bands and make its Q very narrow. Then, boost the band and sweep across the mid-frequency area on the EQ and stop when something sounds harsh or unpleasant to listen to. Then simply reduce that frequency. How much you reduce it by is up to you, but -6 dB is generally a good amount. When boosting frequencies with an EQ, avoid creating extreme peaks, as this makes the instrument sound very unnatural. Compression. Compression is much harder to hear. This tool is used to control the dynamic range of an instrument or a performance. When an instrument gets too loud, the compressor can be used to ensure that the loud parts don't sound out of place or distract from the performance. Compression on live performances is very common, as we want to reduce the extreme dynamic parts of a live performance to create a pleasant and musical listening experience for the audience. Note that having a wide dynamic range is not always a negative. Compression is used to control the extremes. For quick channels, this is a simple button that can be switched on. For complete channels, the compressor is extremely versatile with good control functions. To set compression, select a ratio between 3:1 and 5:1. Lower the threshold until you see red show up on this meter here. Select soft knee, then increase the gain so that the input and output meter somewhat match. This will result in transparent compression, which is good for most genres. A good instrument to practice compression on is drums. The quick transients of the instrument make it easier to hear compression. There are also tons of really useful YouTube videos going over compression. Links in the description. If this seems somewhat overwhelming, then don't worry. Live compression is subtle and people in the audience won't notice or care if you're using compression. Practice this in your own time and use it when you feel confident. Monitor mix. For some performances, you may need to set a monitor mix. The monitor mix is similar to the front of house mix, but it's tailored for the performer. This is used to ensure that the performers can hear themselves and other members on stage. The two ways to send a monitor mix to the performer are either through a monitor wedge or through in-ear monitors. This mixer has 6 mono outputs that can be renamed and configured in the output section. One important setting to keep in mind here is the input send levels. Pre-fader means that each output is independent from the front of house. Adjusting the volume in the main left-right fader page will not affect the monitor mix. However, post-fader means that the monitor is dependent on and follows the main left and right mix. In post-fader mode, if the front of house mix is adjusted, the monitor mix will be affected relatively. This setting is generally kept on pre-fader mode. The monitor mix can be adjusted to the Send To button on the top right of the fader page. The background color changes accordingly as set in the config page. Here, you can set the mix for the performers by asking them what they want to hear. This takes some back and forth to get right, as each performer may want to hear different parts of the mix. This is where naming and organizing your tracks can come in handy and makes this process easy. If you're connecting two monitor wedges, one common problem will be feedback. This is greatly reduced if the performer is using a mic stand, but can be a problem in handheld microphone situations. Although the mixer has a feedback assistant feature, the best thing to do here is to ask the performer to be mindful of their mic and not to point it at the monitors. I'd advise using the feedback assistant here also, just in case. Another way to send monitor mixes is through in-ear monitors. This requires more gear, but allows the performer to set their own monitor mix as they like and without your input. Up to 6 performers can connect to the mixer through Wi-Fi and use the CQ4U app on their phones to adjust their mix. This means the performer has complete control over what they want to hear. However, some performers may not like wearing earphones while performing. This is my preferred method for monitoring, as it reduces the chances of feedback to near zero, as the volume on stage is extremely quiet. Effects. The mixer has a dedicated effects section page. Up to 4 separate effects can be used at the same time. The 2 most common effect types are reverb and delay. The control tab lets you adjust the effects parameters such as size, decay, and has some presets that can be used. The input tab is where we can decide which tracks we want the effects on. When it comes to effects, less is more. Generally, the venue will have some reverb to it already, so there's no need to go overboard. Reverb can be used to enhance the depth in a mix. The more reverb on a track, the further far it will sound. On this mixer, the effects unit can also be inserted on a single track. For example, the delay effect or any other effect can be inserted on just the piano track. This makes the effects unit like a plugin in a DAW and makes this mixer versatile, allowing for more creative possibilities. Along with reverb and delay, there is also a chorus, doubler, flanger on this mixer. The effects can also be sent to the monitors to the 3rd tab in the monitor mix fader page. Custom layer, DCAs, and soft keys. Custom layer allows the inputs and output channels to be organized in any order. This becomes especially useful when combined with DCAs and mute groups, and makes the typical fader page extremely versatile. This function can be found in Config, Control and Network, and under Custom Layer. To switch between the normal and custom layers, there is a button on the main fader page. DCAs. A DCA is a fader that can change the volume levels of multiple channels at once. For example, we can assign inputs 1, 2, 3, and 4 to DCA 1. We can still adjust the fader levels of input 1 to 4, but if we want all 4 inputs to be quieter or louder, we can do this more easily with the DCA 1 fader. We can now move DCA 1 to page A on the custom layer. This is great for drums as the first 4 tracks become one drummer fader. This can condense a large mix down and make the mixer more accessible. Soft keys. There are 3 soft keys on this mixer that can be configured greatly. I have assigned mine to a panic mute and multi-track record and stop. They can also be set to a tap tempo for the delay effect, scene next, and other functions. These come in handy all the time, and having a physical button to press feels really good. To set up a panic mute, go to the config page, control a network, and then mute groups. Assign all the outputs to mute group 1, then go to the soft control tab and select one of the soft keys. Set the function to be mute group mute and the source to be mute group 1. Now when you press the soft key, it will mute all the outputs just with one button. Setting up multi-track record and stop. In the soft control tab, select a soft key and set the function to multi-track play/record, and set the control to record/stop. Note that you will need to arm the inputs that you want to record on the multi-track record page. Here's a quick summary of the tips in this video. Find a consistent order for your inputs. Get your volumes right. Prioritize the vocals or the main melody when mixing. Remember that gain is not the same as volume. Don't stress compression. Make sure the performers are happy with the monitoring mix. Don't overuse effects, and practice. I'd love to hear if there's anything you'd like for me to go over in more detail. If you've got any advice or insight, please comment down below, and thanks for watching.